So, last night the second half of Dark Side of the Ring debuted, and it was basically focusing on the plane ride from hell, the infamous trip back from London to the United States after the Insurrection pay-per-view for the Raw brand, although they didn't really say Raw brand, but it mainly was a Raw pay-per-view in London. And I'll say this about the episode. I thought it was a good start. I thought it was an interesting start. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have already heard many stories being told about the plane ride from hell and everything. But they were able to get better, perspectives as to what happened and everything. They even got one of the flight attendants who basically, was just, overwhelmed with what happened. And, she even said that she basically said that this is one of the reasons why she basically felt uncomfortable wanting to talk about this. But she did say that after she talked to her daughter, finally, they talked about this anyway in the confidential sneak peek a couple weeks prior. But basically, the flight attendant they talked to, at first didn't want to do it, and then after telling her daughter exactly what happened, finally, I guess her daughter encouraged her, hey, go out there and talk about this, give your side of the story of what happened. And she does, but you could definitely tell that she's not very comfortable in talking about it. She even says that, towards the end of the show, that she basically felt, uncomfortable talking about it because it's something that she wants to try to forget. Obviously, she doesn't want to remember, at all. But she does remember it from her point of view, very vividly because she was there. She was there. So they talked to her, and you could kind of tell that it's kind of basically like a two-sided story deal between the sides. Like, she has her side of what happened, and then you have the wrestlers, the superstars that were on that flight that they interviewed, giving their side of it. And you can kind of tell that, the wrestlers are kind of like, yeah, that, some of this that she's telling you, because obviously they relay what, each other say, what one has said to the others. Like, they'll relay what she's saying to like the wrestlers, and they'll relay what the wrestlers are saying to her and stuff like that. And basically, again, it's a story. It's basically a story of it's a tale of two stories, is what it is. Because, like I said, the wrestlers, the superstars who are on the flight, they feel like what this lady is saying is not accurate, that it doesn't add up. But yet she says it does. She counters by saying everything that happened is true, and she even has another flight attendant that felt the same way, that suggested that she do what she did, and that's go to court or take WWE to court for what happened, and which she did, and it resulted in them settling out of court. So yeah, they went back and forth, like I said, on the whole situation. And they did address a lot of stuff. Like they addressed Ric Flair and how he acted during the flight, and they even said that Ric Flair, because what they do when they can't get a hold of somebody for the episode, they just go by what that person, that wrestler last said about the incident. And basically Ric Flair, to this day, according to the little caption at the bottom when they were talking about it, said that even to this day he attests that nothing really happened. He doesn't know what he basically, he's denying what this lady's saying. Now here's the thing though. If you've been drinking a little bit, you basically that'll basically cause your memory to get fuzzy. That's the one thing I have to point out here, is that when you drink, and believe me, myself and my sisters, and at times when we've drank a little too much, we won't remember what we've said the next day, or maybe months from now, after, from that night. So when you drink a lot, especially if it's heavy liquor, you're basically not going to remember, and not even months, maybe even years after it happened, you're not going to remember what you did. So what this flight attendant says Ric Flair did to her, it might have happened, but he and the other wrestlers, don't remember because they were drinking a lot. Maybe, some not drinking as heavy as the others, but, they were still drinking. So maybe they don't remember. And of course, you got to remember, some of these men and women, mostly the guys they were talking to, they get a lot of chair shots to the head, by chairs, trash cans, barbed wire at times. So, it's going to scramble a few brain cells, there's no doubt. So that would basically scramble any memory of exactly what happened. Although these are the kind of events you don't, tend to forget, especially when you're a part of them. But yeah, again, the show is basically a tale of two stories. It's the flight attendant story versus the wrestler's story, and things like that. Now she does say that one of the people that she had to basically deal with was Dustin Rhodes. Now they didn't get Dustin, which I was surprised they didn't get Dustin Rhodes for this because he was on there. But it was Dustin that had to stop Ric Flair from pestering this lady and making her do things she didn't want to do. I mean, she even says at one time he, because what he's doing is obviously he's drunk and all that. He's strolling around doing Ric Flair kind of woo kind of thing. And they say basically this is typical for Ric to do when he wants to let loose and everything. He'll just put on his robe, be stripped naked or whatever. And but this time it went a little too far because I think he might have been drinking, or he was drinking. And basically she states that he made her touch his you-know-what. And he was making advancements towards her. He had trapped her in what is known as the galley. He had trapped her in the galley, so she couldn't, really get out. And Dustin, according to what the flight attendant said, had to be the one to be like, Rick, leave her alone, let her be. So yeah, it was basically, like I said, it's a tale of two sides, if you want to look at it that way. But yeah, they explained everything of how this all came about. They explained how they went on the trip, how they made various stops by plane, if you will, to, places to the shows in Germany and in Switzerland, and then finally concluding in London, England at Wembley Arena for Insurrection. And the lady did mention that they would go out and they would hang out with them because, they don't get to really do that much, especially, since at that time, according to what she said, she just had a daughter. So she doesn't, she didn't really have much time to go out and relax and just enjoy herself. And, that's what she did. She decided to take this opportunity to go out and enjoy herself. And, I look at it this way, having a child is a blessing and it's great. And she's proud of that. She's proud to have a daughter. But the thing is, when you combine that with a job like what she has, getting a break once in a while is pretty. What's the word I'm looking for? Lethargic, if you will. It's pretty lethargic. Basically therapeutic. Therapeutic is the word I'm looking for. It's pretty much therapeutic, and she was glad to be hanging out with them. Just having a few drinks here and there at the bars when they would do that after the shows. But then it was the flight. On the way back to the States that really things got out of hand. And they explained that they had to book because they had to be in Hartford 2 days afterwards. Because the pay-per-view in London, because pay-per-views, I guess wrestling-wise, happen on Saturdays in London, which would explain why SummerSlam 92 was taped on a Saturday but then aired on a Monday. The thing is, they had to be back in time, and they couldn't get on a regular flight. So they had to book a charter flight. They had to book one of those expensive charter flights to where you just have the plane to yourself. It's just you and the people and you have access to be able to have anything you want to drink, anything you want to eat. You're basically flying in the lap. You're flying in the lap of luxury, is what it is. You're basically flying in the lap of luxury on the way to your destination. And they basically all say that this is what they did. The flight attendant says that this was probably the nicest, plane that she's been on, because the rug was bigger than the rug she has at home, or she had at home. And they're all getting on board and everything, or getting ready. They're basically all on board, I should say. They're all on board the plane, getting ready to take off, when they get the news that there's going to be a delay. Now, of course, like anybody that's been on a flight like I have, you're thinking, oh, it's 30 minutes, an hour at least, 2 hours at most. These guys had to wait for about 7 to 8 hours, and that wasn't good. So what they did to buy the time is they brought out liquor carts. And they would pour the superstars and personnel liquor to kind of buy the time. They would also give them, bring them stuff to eat, because, they had to wait on the tarmac until they were able to go. And it was all because of a weather delay in Connecticut, not in London or across the Atlantic. So it was mainly in Connecticut that caused them to have to be delayed in England. So anyways, they're, like I said, they're serving them the alcohol, they're bringing stuff to eat for them. But then, as she pretty much points out, and I think some of the wrestlers also coincided with this a little bit, but mostly as the flight attendant points out, basically after that one cart of liquor was demolished, not literally but figuratively, like the liquor was gone, they brought in a second cart. And it's almost like, from what she was saying, that as soon as they brought that in, that second cart of liquor, that was gone, that was demolished. So they brought in a third cart. And this is where basically she and some of the wrestlers started saying that that's when things started to get a little cuckoo, a little bit like people were having too much. And it even got to the point that, according to the flight attendant, they were going to, that the wrestlers were starting to pour the liquor into the glass themselves. Like, the flight attendants are supposed to be the ones to serve you the drinks, bring you the food, and all that, right? The wrestlers that were on the flight back, the Raw brand wrestlers at that time, were basically pouring the drinks. They started to basically pour them themselves and everything. And PJ Polanco, known as Just Incredible, he basically states that it didn't matter how well. Basically, he says, from what I can recall by watching it, he basically states that it wouldn't have mattered if they tried to prevent them from getting another cart or anything, because I think they brought in another cart of liquor, but and everything, and again, that's when things started to get a little weird. But PJ basically says it wouldn't have mattered, what they tried to do. They were going to get to, if they wanted that liquor, they were going to get to it and pour it themselves. He even states that Ric Flair, being who he is, has enough money to where he could be like, here, we'll take that cart now, thank you. And that would be it. But afterwards, if you will, they finally do, after the delay that is, they finally do take off. And then that's when everything goes straight to, where. Because, everybody's trying to relax. Like, okay, you're on a flight, long flight, you like this, you want to and you have something like this in the back of your seat most times. You just want to lean back a little bit. If it lets you lean back, you lean back. Or the chair that is, if it lets you lean back a little bit, you can lean back. And you just want to rest and everything, right? Kind of sleep a little bit before you get to your destination. Well, what happened was, some of the superstars tried to do that, but the rest ended up being very reckless. Like Curt Hennig, they talk about Curt Hennig that, as soon as they knew he came back into the company, that, him having a reputation of being a prankster when he was in the company prior, and even, I guess, during his tenure in WCW, they knew that him coming back in, the pranks were going to resume, and they did. And they resumed with him, according to what many of the stars said. Him basically putting shaving cream on Brock Lesnar's head and smashing it, and Brock then comes running after him down the hallway, and then that's when that whole incident where, you know, they're tackling each other down and everything. Well, Brock basically lifts him up, I should say. You know, the tossing around, the breaking some of the chairs, you know, like the armrest and, you know, some of the chairs literally. And it gets to the point that they're all the way towards the emergency exit, and that basically, long story short, they say that even though they didn't break they didn't break the door, that if they would have, you know, hit the defueling portion of it, that would have caused a lot of the pressure to let out. And the last thing you need to do is do an emergency landing in the middle of nowhere, mostly in the middle of the Atlantic. And, you know, even the flight attendant's like, you know, where are we going to land for an emergency? In the Atlantic? You know, but yeah, that may have been what would have happened. So thankfully that didn't, you know, JR, he was told, because he's up in front with Vince and some of the other personnel and everything, and he's told, you got to come back here, something's going on. So JR goes back there, sees what's happening, and he's able to try to break it up. JR, basically, who they did get for this video, for this episode, I should say, JR was like, you know, he felt like he was watching kids. It's like, you know, yeah, he's in charge of he's in charge of talent and everything at that time, but he felt like he was watching kids. Like, you know, these are grown men that I think the term they used were acting like high school jocks is what they were. You know, that's what, you know, they perceived them to be acting like, or they basically said they were acting like, because they said that what it was that, again, that spewed this was the alcohol, all of the amounts of alcohol they took. And it was basically the equivalent of, let's say, a high school team, you know, hanging out, waiting for the bus to leave or waiting for a bus to get, you know, repaired or brought to them to take them home. And they have access to a lot of alcohol that they shouldn't have access to. And they start drinking it. And on the way home, they start acting stupid, if you know what I mean. And that's basically what they jocked this up as being the equivalent almost of. And, you know, long story short, JR just felt like he was watching a bunch of kids, and he didn't like it. And that wasn't the end of things either. They even say that Michael Hayes had a lot to drink, and, you know, he even put some things in his drink. They even mentioned that they put stuff in the drink sometimes to help them relax or whatever, like GBCs or something like that. And Michael Hayes got so wasted one time that, not one time, but during that flight, I should say, he got wasted so much during that flight that basically he went up to Bradshaw, JBL, who I'm surprised they didn't get because he's freelance. I mean, I know he's connected to WWE, but come on, John, this is something you could talk about. You wouldn't be in trouble because of your, you know, association with WWE. I don't think he would have faced any consequences. But basically what happens is that he goes up to Bradshaw, and, you know, because Bradshaw's just like trying to relax. He's trying to sleep, right? And, you know, he's trying to sleep. Like, you know, he's trying to relax and everything like this. And, you know, Hayes, according to what they said, came up to him and just, BAM! Punched him right in the face. And this busted, because Bradshaw had already been busted up during the match on the show. He had already been busted up on the show during the match. So what happened is that he says that Michael Hayes just went bam to a sleeping Bradshaw. This wakes Bradshaw up. It busts him open again, and Bradshaw just goes wailing away, you know, not wailing away, but he just basically goes boom, almost like a slap, and knocks Hayes down, which, you know, they did get a chuckle at remembering, because no one had ever done that to Michael Hayes. No one had ever slapped or punched or slapped and knocked out Michael Hayes. So yeah, Michael Hayes basically after that was knocked down, and I guess he got back up and he went sit down on his seat, and after another drink or so, and he fell asleep. He was out of it because he had too much, and the punch and all that by Bradshaw in retaliation to what he did kind of, I guess, added to him finally just settling down, having one more drink, and knocking out. But he was so out at that time. And I think he was sitting in front of Bradshaw, that Bradshaw had to move, and they get X-Pac, who, again, I'm surprised they didn't get either for this one, because, you know, even though he's connected to WWE, Come on, he's a free agent. He can say whatever he wants, right? They didn't get Sean Waltman, and come on. This guy's a great storyteller. Anyway, they asked Sean to come over, and Sean basically, because they like to play, because they were, again, drinking a little bit, they wanted to play some pranks on Hayes, as well as teach him a lesson about what he did. They grab his ponytail, and they go, snip! And, yeah, they basically, they take it like a trophy, just to basically see what his reaction's going to be when he wakes up. And when he does wake up, he's not happy. He goes around asking who did this, do they know who did it? And JR basically says that when they got to the arena that day, to the arena on Monday, I should say, somebody asked him, did you see what they did with Michael Hayes' ponytail? And he's like, no. And they point him in the direction where it basically, the superstars hung the ponytail up in a plastic bag on the door. JR grabs it and he says, I just threw it away. Because it's like, because he basically felt that wasn't necessary for them to do. Anyway, JR, like I said, he was not happy. He was disappointed, in the actions of the stars and everything. And because he was in charge of talent relations, basically he was in charge of the talent, it fell upon him to basically deal out the consequences. Like Vince, okay, here's the thing. They did confirm what a lot of people suspected here. That, everything goes through Vince. The guy that writes the checks, he has the final say. Everyone has pretty much known that. So, anyway, Vince basically puts it on JR. And JR basically is like, it all fell upon me. I had to do something. And Vince is like, you got to come up with a punishment because this is an embarrassment. This is an embarrassment for us. This is an embarrassment for me. This is an embarrassment for the company. You got to do something. You got to do something, right? So JR, he's assigned with, dealing out the punishments. Whether it's fines, suspensions, or firings. So JR basically has to go, and because of the problems some of these stars had previously with substance abuse and all that, he had to fire some of them. He had to fire Curt Hennig, and he had to fire Scott Hall. And, everybody thought, with Hennig being fired, that, okay, Henning's not going to be gone long. They're going to bring him back, and he'll be fine. Unfortunately, of course, as we all know, Curt Hennig passed away, from what they understand, from what they could tell, not that long afterwards. Basically 2003 he passed away, so they're assuming he passed away less than a year after this happened. And then Scott Hall, according to JR had to, call him up and said, look, we made a mistake putting you back on the road. You're not ready, so, we got to let you go. And that's what they did. They let him go. And, of course, as we know, afterwards he ended up in TNA, during the first couple of episodes. He ended up back in TNA. But the thing, he ended up not back in TNA, but he ended up in TNA when it was known as NWA TNA. But anyway, yeah, they had to let him go because of his abuse, his substance abuse, and the fact that, according to PJ Blanco, just incredible, he was so out of it, they thought he was dead. They thought, oh my God, is he dead? But he wasn't. He was just totally passed out, and PJ basically had to pick him up and put him down in a wheelchair. He said he had to pick him up, get him a wheelchair, put him down in it, put sunglasses on him, and wheel him through customs. He had to wheel him through customs and everything. Basically making up something like, oh, he was sick or whatever. But he had to wheel him through customs. And he states that when he wheeled him through customs and got to where JR was, he starts seeing JR, and JR's like not happy. And PJ's like, look, I'm here. I'm wheeling him, So, yeah, it was not a good sign for Scott. And they did kind of get Scott a little bit. Not really. It was a voiceover I think they had from a previous interview they did with him. But, they did get Scott's vocal acknowledgement about what happened. Because according to the flight attendant, he was so out of it that when she went to check on him, he was waking up, and he grabbed her, opened he grabbed her, basically causing, I think, her top to open a little bit, and he said he was going to lick her, and I think he was about to do that or something, or he did, I don't know. I have to go back and rewatch a little bit of it, but I know she said he started to try to lick her, and when she tried to get away, he was like holding on to her like he was going to do something else, and then he just passed out. And then that's when she was able to, like, get out of there. And I think that's what caused her to basically be like, I'm going to stay in the galley for the rest of the flight. I am not going to go out there. Because she didn't want to deal with the BS that was happening. But yeah, it was interesting flight, to say the least. When you hear it from both sides of the equation, it was an interesting flight, no doubt. I mean, they talked to Mike Chioda, who was there as well, and again, even he acknowledges, there was this, I don't think he had anything to drink, but he can definitely tell that those that were drinking a lot were really just, hammered. They were getting to the point to where they were becoming belligerent. Even Terry Reynolds, they got Terry Reynolds, Marlena, as she was known in WWE. They got her, and she's like, she's basically saying the same stuff. She's explaining that she's impressed by the plane that they got and everything. That she has never seen something like that in a while, if at all. And she basically told her side of things. She just explained how things went from her point of view, what she experienced. She even says that Brock tried to come on to her, and there was some of the wrestlers that denied that he didn't do that. And one of the things that they kept saying when it came to some of these situations is, don't sell it. In other words, don't let them get to you and everything. So Terry says that Brock tried to come on to her. Some of the wrestlers are like, I don't remember that happening. If it did, we can't say. And I think JR even said that. It's like, I don't remember Brock doing that, but if it did, it did. Who's to say? And the same thing with Ric Flair. He's like, I don't know if that happened or not, but if it did, it did. So, anyway, they, Terry, like I said, she says her side of things. She talks about how Dustin started singing to her, because we heard about that story. Like, he gets on the PA system and he starts singing, all these different, love songs and stuff. And basically, it's embarrassing. She's like, oh my gosh, And again, basically the term is like, don't sell it. Don't let it get to you, right? Don't sell it. And finally, I think it's who is it? It's JR. Yeah, I think it's JR. That gets to him and gets to Dustin and tell him to cool down, knock it off. Stop doing this. And finally, Dustin sits down, and I think, according to what the flight attendant said, moments after he sat down, he passed out. So he passed out after that. And, she was able to get her PA speaker away from him after that. So, yeah, overall, when you watch this episode, it definitely tells you from both, as I said before, from both sides of the story. Definitely paints you, I should say, not pictures, but paints you a... I'll put it this way, a very hectic, chaotic, never want to go through this kind of crap again like flight. And yeah, I don't blame any of the wrestlers, for agreeing not to go through that again. I don't blame any of the flight attendants that will still work, that were on that flight, that were working that flight, that are probably still working today. I don't blame them for not wanting to go through that again. I don't blame them whatsoever. And, hopefully, that never happens again. Now, according to JR, a lot of the stars, a lot of the young and up-and-coming stars, like John Cena and the others that came in afterwards, and those that had heard about it, those that were on the SmackDown side of things, and that was the noon whistle going off here in Newman, but those that heard about it that were on the SmackDown side of things, pretty much are like, yeah, we're not going to go, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. Basically, the lesson they learned was, if we have to be delayed, we ain't going through that crap again. And I think a good example of the fact that they didn't go through that crap again was when they all got trapped for a while, if you will, to the point that I think SmackDown had to take over Raw. that, you know, basically because of the fact that because of the, you know, deal WWE has with Saudi Arabia, they got trapped. The Raw stars, anyway, got trapped in Saudi, so they had to rely on NXT and SmackDown superstars to help carry Raw that one day. So yeah, you know, at least the lesson was learned, because while they were waiting during that, you know, hectic moment, and maybe we'll see a Dark Side of the Ring on that down the line, while they were waiting for that hectic moment to pass, at least they didn't do what happened, or at least they didn't repeat, I should say, what happened in 2002 with the superstars there. But anyway, though, it's an interesting watch. I highly recommend watching it. Like I said in the other video, I highly recommend watching the entire series. It is really, really good. It is spun off all these other series like Dark Side of the 90s, which finished up last night afterwards with a new episode that came on after the Dark Side of the Ring. As well as, you know, they did a Dark Side of Football. And I'm pretty sure they're going to have other Dark Side stuff coming out as well down the line because of the success of this original series. So like I said, I recommend checking it out. I recommend checking out this episode if you want a more interesting take of things you may have already heard about, if not all didn't know about. You know, I'd suggest checking this out because again, you get the flight attendant, one of them that was on the flight, that saw this with her own eyes. I mean, she even said, because the one thing flight attendants are and maintenance are supposed to do after a flight is if there's any mess or anything on the ground or in the seats, you got to clean it up, right? And she just tells the other flight attendants, we ain't doing that, because what they saw on the ground was, you know, not just, you know, a whole mess of like scraps of food and booze, you know, and booze and all that. Well, basically stains of booze and all that, if you get my drift. But they also saw like pills, syringes, and she's like, I'm not touching this. That's not my job. We're not touching this. And she's like, we're leaving. We're leaving. And I think she even said that the people in charge were like, well, you got to clean this up. And she's like, you know, we're not doing it. We're leaving. And that's what they did. I don't think she lost her job because of that. But she, you know, because what she was doing, she was like, look, this is not our fault. It's their fault. We're leaving. You know, so, you know, that's what so that's what happened. And I'll say this, when I saw her talk about the fact that they saw syringes and they were about to pick that up, and I think she's telling the flight attendant, no, don't do that. We're not doing this. We're going to leave. This is not our mess to clean up. It did remind me of the fact that one of the things they would teach me at Walmart was if you're going to have to pick up something like a syringe, you got to have a glove because you don't know what that thing has. And they did show that one of the attendants had a glove in the dramatization. But basically, like I said, the flight attendant that they interviewed is like, no, we're not doing this, we're leaving. And that's what they did. So overall, though, like I said, if you want an interesting take on what you've already heard and haven't heard about the plane ride from hell, you got to check out this episode because I thought they did a decent job here. I thought they did a really good, decent job. Next week, they're going to talk about Chris Kanyon. They got DDP. They got the Young Bucks, which was a surprise, but I think the reason they got the Young Bucks is because one thing about Kanyon is he's always known as the innovator of offense. So I'm sure, and I think the Bucks may have worked with him before. So I'm sure the Young Bucks took inspiration on how they can be innovative in what they do. So they got the Young Bucks for this. They got Dallas Page for this. They got James Vanderberg, Sinister Minister, if you will, Father James Mitchell as he's known, as well. They got him. So they got from what I've seen so far, they've got a decent cavalry of people to talk about when it comes to Chris Kanyon and, you know, what he's gone through and everything, or what he went through and everything during his time on this planet, during his time in the business and things like that. So anyway, though, guys, like I said, I highly recommend checking out the Plane Ride from Hell episode for the mid-season premiere of Dark Side of the Ring. I think you'll enjoy it. And again, next week they're going to be talking about Chris Kanyon, and I can't wait for that one. So till next time, guys, let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments, as well as in the live chat during the premiere. Like the video, check out my Teespring store, and I am out.